Welcome to the instructional video for the Birch Grove High Deck Chair, and thank you for purchasing a Birch Grove Furnishings product. Now what you see here on the table is all of the parts without the clamp. It'll come in, you're going to have 4 boxes that this chair is going to come in. All of your parts are going to be here. This is how they're going to look in the box as they come out of the box. Also I recommend you're going to have your hardware in a Ziploc bag. You're going to have 2-inch screws, which are right here. And you're going to have 1 3/4 screws. It's important as to where you use what. It's also recommended that you have probably a cordless drill. That's the easiest way to do this. You're also going to have in there 2 bits. One a T25 and a T20 that'll work for these screws. The T20 is for the 1 3/4 screws, and the T25 is for the 2-inch screws. Now I recommend that when you open up your packages that you get a container and put your screws in your container, your screws and your bolts. You also are going to end up with 3.5-inch bolts and 2.5-inch bolts. So to start off with, I put in my T20 driver. My box of my 1 3/4-inch screws. We're going to set that aside for the moment. This is your seat right here. And this is a brace here that holds it together. This is your seat back. Your seat back goes in here. Now there's an angle cut on this so that it has a proper angle for comfort. It's recommended what you do to begin with. This is where your 3.5-inch bolts come in. When you put your legs on, they're going to be out here. We'll take our 2-inch screws first of all. You put this on a flat surface so you can put this seat back down so it sits flat. And I've got my hand back here to hold things in place a little bit to kind of keep it from tipping over on me. Take a 2-inch screw, put it here, and the hole should be pre-drilled for this. And it'll go right into there. Same thing here. I'm feeling how this tips back and forth. I'm making sure that this is sitting level. This is sitting level and that's sitting level. Another 2-inch screw, put it in there. That's how you start with that. Now it's important, the 1 3/4 screws are what goes in the sides here to hold this together. Now there's a hole here, this is where the bolt goes, but there's a leg that comes up through here too as well. So we're going to take, and we're going to hold off on using that, and we're going to put these screws in here just to kind of hold things together. Now, there are screws on this side of the chair, the 1 3/4 screws, which I'm going to put another one in here too as well. Now there's holes here. You can't see them probably on the video here, but the holes are on the outside here and they're on the inside here. They're not out here. The reason for that is the way we've got jigs and we put these things together. Now I'm sinking this just a little bit and it kind of clamps it together. But what you're going to want to do when we get our leg on here and we get our bolt in here, that's going to clamp that all together better. And then I'm going to pull this out and re-screw it back in so that we know this joint is tight. Once I get the bolt in there and start to tighten it out, I'm going to pull it out, because then the bolt is going to clamp these joints together. The bolts are the structural part of your chair. They're going to keep things from falling apart, and that's the most crucial part of it, because that's one of the strengths that we do when we do in Birch Furnishings and how we build it. And we're going to put one here. So I've turned my chair over. I grab the leg assembly, leg and arm assembly. L, left, L, left. That's where they go. Take and put this up here. You take 2.5-inch carriage bolt. Always handy to have your tools close by. Put your bolt out a little bit, see where it lines up. Okay, there's that. Now I've got holes in the sides here. This thing will line up. So, 1 3/4 screws now. Reason for that, this splits out if it's longer. 2-inch screws go in when you attach this and you're coming into end grain and you've got stronger areas. We used a 2-inch screw here because it was going into the 3 3/8. That's what we did there. So get the 1 3/4, put them in the hole here. Then I start my screw and I can look at my hole, get my hole lined up. Now I'm going to back it down. It's important to have a tight joint. I like these because they're protected. And they put pressure on real good. You sink it and snug it up. Don't sink it too far though. There's going to be 3 screws to go in here. Now what I did there, I felt the screw starting to push this thing away, which meant I wasn't lined up on my hole. So I backed it back out and moved it over a little bit to feel the screw going in. Now you don't want to go too fast. You know, there's side grain here. You can miss the hole and you can go right in, but you run a chance of splitting your piece. So you want to make sure you get in the pre-drilled hole that's already there. These chairs were already assembled in the factory before they were taken apart and boxed up. So the screws all work, the holes all line up. The chairs work just fine. So you have to make sure you get the holes lined up when you put your screws in. In this instance, the leg, the screws are right here. The holes are right here. On the other leg, on the other side, the screws are on the outside. Again, that's the way the jigs are set up when we put these chairs together. And snug that up a little bit. And do that. Now, it may be helpful, what you can do is to take and put your nut on here. And using a 7/16 driver, I use a socket set, or a 7/16 box end wrench, open end wrench, whatever wrench you want. Take and tighten this down. This can act as a clamp. So the best thing then that really to do to have your screws not all the way in yet. But I put those in so you can line up the hole. Then you take your wrench and you tighten this down, putting your hand on the other side where the bolt is so it doesn't spin on you. When you feel it start to spin, you're done. Snug it up nice and tight. Part of the structural strength of these chairs are the tightness of the joint with the bolt and the wood together. If you don't have your joints tight while you're sitting in your chair, it starts moving around and then it starts to work itself loose and it makes the wood loosen up as well. Then you start having problems. So we've got our arm and our leg and arm rest on this side of the chair put together. This again is R right, R for the right here. Two 2.5 inch bolt. Take my screws, get them started. Look for the hole, there it is. I backed off. Go back to my clamp. You can get a small screw clamp, C-clamp if you want. If you do that, you want to put some blocking in to protect your wood so it doesn't get all marred by the clamp when you screw it down. That's why I like these, because they have protectors on them. Tighten that up. Joints are tight. You want to make sure that it helps. Now here's the rear leg assembly here. Now it's going to be obvious there are no holes here. So this is the bottom. There are holes here. These are going to line up here. Take a look at that. You want to make sure that your leg, this goes on the outside. You can see there's gaps here. This is more towards the front that's going to be exposed. So you put it in here. Now this is where the 3.5 inch bolts come in. You have 2 of these in there. Start the bolt. Then there's a hole over here it goes into. You leave it stick out just a little bit. I've taken and I've punched it out. I got this a little bit crooked so I can see where my bolt goes. When I got that started, then I can drive this whole bolt home. And this bolt's going to go through all 3 of these pieces of wood coming out of here. Now we just pick this up here, and it's going to be going back this direction here, so. You'll be able to find that. Now that gets these here. Now you can see, you know, this is going to turn back and forth. 1 3/4 screws, not 2 inch. 2 inch is going to go all the way through. And I'm going to tip this back. And I can see, I mean, you don't see it here, but there's a hole right here. And that's going to correspond with this hole. And then if we tip this up here, there's a hole here. So these two holes are going to line up with something. So I'd go with one of these here, and you're going to have to just kind of feel your way along here a little bit. When you got it lined up, it goes right in. If it's not, you're gonna have to back it off because you've got it in the wrong place. Now it's helpful again, use these bolts as a clamp. I'm looking at this here and I see a gap in my joint. You won't be able to see that on the video, but there's a gap here in the joint. But I put those in there so I could line this up so I knew where they were. Then I'm going to put my nuts on here. And I'm going to snug this up. When I start feeling it snug up, I'm going to back these screws out. Because again, I want a tight joint. So I'm going to tighten this up until I don't see any daylight in there. Snug it up a little bit and not too tight. And start putting my screws back in. Went right in the hole, so we're good. You know, watch it. If it moves on you a little bit, it did move on me a little bit, I just moved it back. So I knew where it needed to be, but that's the important part. And then you can snug those up a little bit, and then finish tightening up your bolt. Put your thumb on it, make sure it doesn't spin on you, and snug it up good and tight. Again, this is the strength of your chair. It's absolutely important. I sink this home, and it's going to sink it down in a little bit, and that's good. That's what you want. You can tighten it pretty good if it never spins on you, and I've got a good seat there. That's good enough. Now we've got this one over here. I hadn't put this one on yet. Same thing here. I'm making sure my screws are going on the hole. I'm looking, I got a little bit of daylight. So I snug this up. I'm pulling this down so that the head goes in a little ways. Now I'm a little snug. Snugged up just a little bit. Back these out again. I snugged it up so it wouldn't move. And I crank this down so I got it good and nice and tight. I put my screws back in. Again, just making sure it doesn't move on you. Because if you've got a lot of resistance on your screws, then you've caused a problem and you're not lined up. So you want to take and loosen this up a little bit. You can move this around a little bit so your screw holes will line up. I'm snugging it. Again, we don't want to sink these too far. You don't want to get too much water in the holes that there. Especially if you have a northern climate, snow is going to hang out in there. So the shallower the hole, the better off you are. You don't get much water sitting in there. These are all made out of treated lumber, so they should last quite a long time, but they're not indestructible. They won't last forever. If you want a chair that's going to last for 30 years, you can buy this product made out of AZEK. We sell all of our products made out of AZEK, which is a decking product, and we'll put a 30-year warranty on those. You can check that out on the website. I'm going to snug my bolt up. That's snug there. I've got my screws in here. I've got my bolts in here. I've got my 2 screws, my bolt there. We've got our screws here. Go around, check, make sure I've got screws. Make sure I don't have any daylight. No daylight here. I'm looking, I do have daylight, and I haven't tightened this down, so I need to do that. Screws aren't holding these together. There's a lot of our competitors that'll make chairs, and all they use is screws and no bolts. I had a customer come in and said that she went around looking around to see. She compared our stuff to everyone else's. Nobody else does this that she could find. I'm going to snug that up a little bit. Back this screw off. Sinking that home. Now I don't have any daylight there. I got a tight joint. Tighten this up, snug it up. All right. Now, I'm going to tip our chair back up. Now you can see it's kind of wobbly here, and that's what this is for. That's a signature board, but it's also a very important piece of the structure. And we've got our part back there. This is what's called a stretcher. Now this is your footrest that goes together. This is also an important part of the structure here. Now we've taken and put our chair on its back in order to put the footrest on. This is the next step that you want to do. Footrest goes between them here. You got a hole here for the bolt. You can feel it kind of seat in. I drove the bolt through a little bit so it sticks out just a little bit. Then it'll seat into the hole when you find it. And go around to the other side here. Those are in there. This will end up making contact with the back part of what's called the stretcher here. And then that should be pretty much line up the bolt. Now what we've got a situation here is this needs to be spread apart a little bit. This is part of it how when we put it together in a jig, all these parts line up. So it's a little bit tight right here, and I've got to move this. So in order to have that happen, I'm going to have to loosen that nut. I'll actually loosen these screws just a little bit. Like I say, when we put these together in a jig, this part, this part, this part, this part, and this part all go together in one piece so that everything lines up when you've got the chair together. So when we ship it to you the way we do, it's not exactly perfectly lined up anymore. You've got to find that and put that back together right. So, but because they do line up, you can get it back together. You might have to just adjust a little bit. Now I just pushed this, that moved, this all moved. I was able to get this to line up. and bolt lines up. Now I'm going to take and I'm going to put my 2 screws in here as well, so that I know I've got all of my holes lined up and all the screws lined up in the bolt. You can feel how that just goes right on in, so that you know you're right in the pre-drilled hole that was made here in the shop. Now I did that, again, like we did before. I put the screws in to line things up. We're going to back those off and a little bit and crank that down tight first, and then we'll put our screws back in again. Now we're going to put our washers and nuts on. Now there are 2 screws here we need to put in, so we need to put those in. Make sure they line up. The rest of my washers and nuts on here. I don't have my screws in here, so I'll put them in now. Those went in nicely. Put my finger on the other side of the carriage bolt, tighten this up. Tighten that one up. I backed my screws out here again so I can make sure my joint's tight. If you want, you can use clamps like the spring clamp I showed before to hold these things together better, however works well for you. Makes a dent in here, makes a dent in here, you got a good joint. And again, to remind you, don't over tighten the bolts to where it starts to spin. If it spins, you stop. That's as far as you want to go. Okay, so we have our chair almost together. This again is the signature board in the front, and this helps stabilize as well this way. This is A, it's up. We've got A here, B here. Pretty self-explanatory, I think. You should already be together. This is a space that's been already tightened together. If you have kind of a space here, then you want to take and put a clamp on so you can tighten this up. This one's nice and tight, so we're going to go with it the way it is. Now the front board does not sit flush to the front here. It's going to sit back about 1/8 of an inch. This is where your 2-inch screws come in. Now, I've been putting these together for quite a while, so I actually got that lined up pretty good without having to have a problem there. But if you get a little bit about an 1/8 inch back here, and then this is sitting right on top of that footrest support, you're going to be really close. So you put your hand in there and go slow, you can feel it, it'll line it up. You start getting too much resistance, it's going into the end grain, and you're running the risk of splitting out your piece. We snug that up. Now, you want to make sure that you're on a flat surface. I know this table actually isn't perfectly flat, so I know this fits together. But if you're on a good, tight, flat surface, if your chair rocks, you can just loosen up the screws of things a little bit and knock things around until they're straight, until it's flat, until it's not rocking, and then tighten everything back up again. So with all of the different joints that we have here, that's what we can end up having a problem with. So there you have it. A 30-inch high Birch Grove deck chair. Thank you for watching.